Most podcasters ask me, Courtney, why are my downloads so low? And I'll tell them that is the wrong question to be asking. The better question you need to ask is what actually causes low downloads? And that is exactly why I invited Desiree Petrich to join me here in this episode and share the messy truth behind what actually prompted the rebrand of a podcast that she had had for a year that wasn't growing, and how one simple decision changed the entire trajectory of her show. So if you want to create a podcast that you are proud of and one that your listeners can't wait to learn from, then keep listening because this episode is for you. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. Desiree, hey, welcome to the show.
I feel honored to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. You know, I was thinking about this conversation and preparing for this, and I was thinking back to the very first conversation we had, which was over Instagram DMs. And I'll never forget, I was working at a coffee shop that day, and I don't even remember what I was working on, but I was just like so excited to talk to you because in that moment, you were so transparent and so open and so vulnerable with me about your podcasting journey. And I would love to start there with you. Can you take us back to that moment in time and just kind of walk us through, like, what had your podcasting journey looked like up until that point? And what really were you thinking and experiencing in that moment?
And I'm excited to answer that question for you, Courtney. But first, I have to say, I stumbled upon your workshop on Instagram and I watched it. And you said something along the lines of, if you don't have 200 downloads per episode, then it's kind of a problem. And I'm like, I wanted to be so mad at you for it. And I couldn't because I was like, she's speaking directly to me. That's what a good podcaster does. But at that moment, I was like, I've been podcasting for a year. I love it. I do truly love it. But I also have a business that I'm building. And can I justify spending the amount of time on the podcast that I'm spending and not on my business that I'm trying to build for myself and my family? And I said, I have two choices. I can either invest in something like Pod Launch in someone like you who I trust, or I can give up. And that would have to be okay. I would have to be okay with that. And I went through probably a week of internalizing, asking, what would it look like to give it up? And I just said, I love it so much. It doesn't have to make money. It can cost me time, but the connections that I make, the guests that I have on, the friends that I've learned from that I would have never otherwise had the platform to ask them questions. I said, I cannot give that up. I just can't do it. So I think that was a big piece of it. It was like to the death. Can I give it up or not? That was the question. And ultimately, to that point, I think I had been feeling it, but I didn't have a way of like investing. I didn't have any sort of program or person that I was able to invest in and feel like something good would come out the other side. So you gave that to me. And that's when I was finally able to ask myself the question that had been there for a while. I just hadn't asked it yet.
And I appreciate that you were thinking about that so strategically, and not even strategically, but in a raw sense and in an emotional sense too. Because when we start podcasts, a lot of times for many of us, yes, we want it to serve us and our businesses in some way. And it's really easy to start to focus on the numbers and to start to focus on the downloads and looking at, well, this is lower than I thought it would be, or I'm not making money from this. And to really put a lot of pressure on the podcast and by extension on ourselves to perform. And so it sounds like you were really wrestling with that. And I'm so glad our paths crossed when they did, and that you chose to go all in and that you chose to say, you know what, I'm going to give it my all because I love this. And I just want to highlight what you said there, Desiree, because that is the key to succeeding with podcasting. Yes, there's strategy. Yes, there's stuff you could do to grow the show. Yes, we got to get out there and create the content. There's structural things and formatting things and messaging things and positioning and all this stuff that we could do. And that you have done, and that I'm going to dig into because it's all so good. But without the actual love of the process, it will be very difficult to grow. And I'm saying that if you're listening right now, and maybe you were in the same place Desiree was, or you're looking at a podcast, maybe you want to launch it, and you're like, I want it to give me all of these things, but deep down, maybe you haven't decided, yes, I'd want to do this because I love it. So I just wanted to highlight that because I do think that that was such an important and foundational piece of all that you have changed and updated with your podcast, and what really drove you to be able to make those changes with such certainty and conviction. So can we go there and dig into before and after of what your show was prior to, us working together. And then some of the changes specifically that we made, let's start with your messaging and what you felt like really was getting missed in the message that you were looking to bring to your listeners prior to rebranding your show, and then how that has changed since then and the ways that that's coming through now.
So I have been teaching group fitness classes since I was 19 years old. I started a leadership development company when I was 30. I worked in healthcare for 15 years. I had all of these different passions and I didn't know how to like cut them down, niche down, as they say. I couldn't pick one. And so I was like, it's my podcast. I get to decide what to do. I'm not going to niche down. So I called my podcast Lead with Confidence, and I literally talked about everything and anything that I wanted to. I loved the process. It was great. I had guests from intuitive eating to how do you do 75 hard, and they were just random and they were great and I loved them. But like you said, the messaging wasn't there for any specific person. And so when I asked myself, can I justify giving time to the podcast? It came down to, well, is the podcast in any way, shape, or form coming back and adding value to my business? And the answer was no. The message was too broad. I wanted it to be for everyone. That was the original intent. But when it came down to time and adding value to my business, I said, no, I need to pare down. And that was the message that you shared that I think really spoke to me was, who is my message for? What is the intent of it? And what are they going to get at the end of it? What am I going to get at the end of it? So one thing that I wasn't doing in that first version of the podcast was being my aggressive, somewhat assertive self. I was trying to be everything for everyone. But as you can hear from the new name, You're the Boss, Now What? It's like I'm able to bring in some more of that personality that actually makes me love it more because I'm able to say what I think. I feel like my opinion is more valid in this space because I'm not trying to cater to everyone. I'm trying to cater to the person who wants to hear what it is that I have to say about life and about leadership. And I think that in and of itself, changing the messaging just to align more with my actual voice was a huge change in what I was doing.
I love it. When you actually realized, okay, yes, the podcast needs to serve my business, did anything come up for you or resistance around this idea of niching? Was that hard or was that easy for you?
100%. There was so much resistance around niching down because I had people from my healthcare days listening to the podcast. I had people from my group coaching days listening to the podcast. And I said, if I niche down to leadership, which is what my company does, what I do, I'm going to be excluding all of those people. And I think the interesting thing about niching is I thought that if I chose leadership, I couldn't talk about kids. I couldn't talk about exercise. I couldn't talk about reading unless it happened to be a leadership book. And what I got from niching down and actually choosing leadership was figuring out that I can still talk about those things. I just have to talk about them through the lens of my niche. Those people from my healthcare days, the people from my group fitness days, they're still some of my most loyal listeners because it's what you have to say, how you say it, and the message that you're ultimately trying to help them, which in podcasting, that's kind of the point. You're trying to add value to the people who are listening. So was niching hard? 100%. I think I changed my niche like 4 times, even in the process of it. But it was honestly kind of cathartic to almost do it wrong first so you could figure out, okay, so that actually isn't who I want to speak to. That's not going to give me the life and the enjoyment that this group would. So resistance, yes. Was it necessary? 100%.
Yeah. Well, and this is such an important point because I remember in that process, you're like, okay, I'm realizing and I did all this work and I don't want to waste time and I don't want to backtrack and I don't want to change, but I also feel like this is not right. So I need to change, right? And it is in that process of narrowing not just our focus, but getting really laser clear with the way that we're communicating, that it almost really makes it so obvious the way in which we don't need to communicate or the person in which we don't need to speak to. And that came up a lot in your journey and even around the name. So I remember when we finally nailed who the listener was. And then when it came to actually naming the podcast, you're in a niche, the leadership niche, which there's a lot of leadership podcasts. The industry needed something different. The industry needed an assertive female voice like yours saying, no, like this is who I'm here to serve. These first-time managers who are flailing and they have no idea what they're doing, right? And I'm here to help them. And I need to make sure that in order for them to know that I'm the podcast for them, I've got to be able to communicate in the language that they understand. I remember when you shared, you did a beautiful job of engaging your community throughout the process of all the changes you were making to your show. And you put the announcement of the new name and the new cover art out. And you must have had like 36 or more comments, because I literally was going through them and people were like, it is so clear. It's so relevant. You totally nailed it. You know, this really capitalizes on who you're here to speak to. Like, I'm excited to listen to this. When you made that decision, even though there was resistance and all, to niche down, to get clear on the message, and then to actually see that like in the real world, how that generated the engagement that it did. How did that feel for you to see that kind of unfolding in real time with your show?
So a lot of my community on LinkedIn, they are either first-time entrepreneurs who are the boss now. Even though it's not necessarily my niche, it speaks to them. They're also leadership development individuals like myself who are going in and trying to help individuals and teams. So it felt like validation in a way to say this is a gap in the space right now that needs to be filled. So many people, including myself, are working with executive teams. So many people are working with, teams as a whole, but how many people are working with that brand new leader? How many companies truly invest in that first time manager? And they say you're supposed to speak to the person that you once were. I was the 24-year-old manager who had zero idea of what I was supposed to be doing. And as many times as I asked for help, wasn't given it. If I would have had this podcast or known how to look for it or had someone recommend it to me, it was the exact content that I would have needed back then, which makes it really fun too, is people are recognizing that that's the person that's currently not getting invested in and they need an outlet to be invested in. And that's what I tried to create.
I love it. Okay, so take us through the launch and take us through what that was for you, all the emotions and thoughts and feelings that transpired and came from it, and the results that you got from it with this new angle and this new messaging, and with your podcast filling that gap in the marketplace.
So one thing that I will say to anyone who's starting a podcast is don't be afraid to ask for help. I went in, I asked for people to go listen on launch day. I asked for people to go rate and review. I asked for people to give feedback, right? I mean, positive is always great, but the constructive feedback is good too. And so I was asking for help from my community of LinkedIn people, some people I've never met. I was asking from my family and my friends. And that was the biggest part of the launch process for me, was just being able to say, hey, I did this thing that I'm really proud of. I put so much work into this. I feel like it's finally the right messaging to the right person. It's truly going to help someone who's looking to be helped. And now I need your help to make sure that it's getting in the hands of those people. That was the entire launch process in a sentence for me, was just making sure that all the time and energy I had put into it, it was now actually going to be going somewhere. Something was going to get done with it.
Yeah, definitely. You broke the top 100 in your category, which is so exciting. Congrats on that. I mean, that's huge. There was something that you said right before we hit record today that I was like, right there is actually showing us that your podcast does have the right messaging. It is landing with the right people. And now it's just a matter of getting it in front of more of the right people. Walk me through exactly what you said before we hit record on this episode, because I think this piece is so important for people to hear.
First off, you're testing my ability to remember, but I do happen to remember what we talked about. So when I had my original podcast, every once in a while, you're not technically talking to anyone that you can see the reaction. So you're just hoping that the message gets through to them. Every once in a while, I would get someone say, hey, I listened to your podcast. Great job. Cool. So good. Love it. I get that weekly now, but more so than just someone saying great job, it's saying that episode spoke to me. Here's what it said. Here's how I applied it. And I'm really thankful you did it. It came at the perfect time. Thank you so much for making that episode. And that, I think, has been the biggest change for me, is it's not just feedback of someone patting me on the back and saying you did a great job. It's you truly helped me in doing this thing. The feedback is a lot more specific. It's coming a lot more often. Granted, I have to say, hey, would you go, put that in a review on the actual podcast? That'd be helpful. Thanks. But I'm getting that more and more often from people that I would have never expected to be listening. So it's been really fun to see that change of the quality of the podcast has improved, and the quality of the expectations that I'm able to have from it has greatly improved. I'm getting to feel good about the content that's getting put out there more often.
Yeah. And that's really the key, because at the end of the day, going back to where we started this episode, which is you got to love the process. If you love the process, you got to also love the content that you're putting out there, that creative expression. And that becomes the foundation for the growth, because then from there you can build. Then from there you can go in any direction you want to go with the podcast. But at the end of the day, if it's not serving you in that way, then it's going to be not very life-giving, even if you see the growth. ROI comes in a lot of different forms. And you're seeing a lot of ROI right now. While it's more qualitative than quantitative, qualitative ROI is the precursor to quantitative growth. And this is where we as podcasters need to be able to also align our expectations with the process of podcasting, and that it is a long game. It's going to be longer if you don't have the foundation in place first. It's going to be longer without the right messaging and without the right niche. So you've done that hard work and you're on the path, and you're already shortening the time or the cycle that it would normally take for that to happen. I'm curious though, as you look back on this journey, both your podcast prior to our paths crossing, your podcast that we've worked on together through the rebranding process and really defining who your show is here to serve. And then now as you look ahead for your podcast, what would you say is one of the top lessons that you've learned that you feel like someone listening to this conversation right now should really know?
This might be a hot take, but as I go back and I listen to my episodes, because I do, I find myself asking, am I proud of what I created? Because that I feel is the number one, like I'm my biggest critic. And so I never used to listen back to my episodes because I just had this internal knowing that I wasn't going to be proud of what I was putting out there. And now as I listen back, I find myself laughing out loud to conversations that I'm having with people, even though I was part of the conversation. And I find myself hearing things in a different light that, maybe didn't hit when we were talking about it, even though I'm the one that said it. So I think we continue to relearn lessons as they happen, and we just have to be able to internalize them. But if you have a podcast, I would recommend you listen to it and say, what can I be really proud of in this moment? But how can I continue to expect more from myself? For me, I think the biggest process of going through the pod launch was, how do you structure your episodes so that people know what to look for, when to look for it? How can you tell them, hey, if you didn't go back and if you haven't listened to this last episode, go back. If you want more, here's what we're going to be talking about next week. Not only for a non-planner is that super helpful for me as the podcaster to be like, I actually have to have a plan in place so that I can record this and do it well. But also it's just kind of feeling like there's a structure and it's a little more professional, might not be the right word, but a little bit more intact, and it's actually on purpose.
It's amazing what, again, all of these little micro changes, from the structure to the formatting to the messaging, these are all the precursors to the growth, to the ROI, to the outcomes that we want from the show. And so now for you, Desiree, it really is just a matter of trusting the process and giving it some time and keep doubling down on what you're doing. You have come such a long way in such a short period of time. And it's incredible for me, sitting from where I sit, witnessing your journey and being a small part of it, like to see the feedback and the engagement that you're getting with the show now, knowing that you're sitting here in the midst of it, enjoying the process, proud of what you put out, and really excited to continue serving your audience in this way. Such a beautiful thing to see. So thank you for being here today to share your journey with us and to just be very open and transparent about the ups and downs in the life of a podcaster. I appreciate you and I appreciate being part of your world and to have you here to share your story.
Thank you for believing in me. That's huge to have heard you say that it was good. I mean, it really did make the huge difference that I needed to not only be willing to say, it's good, you've got this, but also here's what you can do better. It meant everything. So thank you.
You're so welcome. And look, speaking of growing a podcast, don't go anywhere, because in the next episode, I have got a reformed corporate CFO and podcast host joining us to break down how you can increase your podcast profitability simply by running your podcast like a business so that you can start monetizing it sooner than you think. That's all coming up next to help you make your business binge-worthy.